Many of us are not failures at all. We have stable jobs, lives that aren't lacking, days that pass by relatively smoothly. We're not in crisis. We haven't hit rock bottom. We're not fighting just to survive. And yet, for a very long time now, we haven't gone anywhere. Life isn't getting worse, but it isn't getting better either. Everything stays frozen in a state of good enough, and we call that fine. This is the most dangerous state a person can be in. Not despair, not extreme suffering, but prolonged comfort. When you're in pain, you're forced to change. When life becomes unbearable, you're pushed to find a way out. But when everything feels just okay, you delay. You tell yourself there's no need to try harder yet, no need to take risks, no need to do anything different. And day after day passes, quietly, gently, until one day you realize you've been standing still for far too long. There's an illusion many people believe in, that as long as life is stable, low pressure, undisturbed, and not too demanding, that's enough. But the truth is, life is rarely destroyed by terrible days. It's slowly worn down by days that are too comfortable. Days when you don't learn anything new. Days when you choose entertainment over growth. Days when you promise yourself, I'll deal with it tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. A life isn't wasted in pain. It's wasted in repeated ease, in a false sense of safety that makes you believe you still have plenty of time, in small habits that aren't wrong but don't lead anywhere either. And most dangerous of all is when you start getting used to the person you are now, even though deep down you know you could become so much more. If you don't wake up in time, comfort will quietly erode your ambition. It dulls your will, makes you afraid of difficulty, and slowly kills the potential you once believed you had. Not because you're incapable, but because you've been too comfortable to be forced to change. And from this moment on, the most important question is no longer, is your life okay? It's this: is your life actually taking you anywhere? Many people are not lazy at all. They wake up every day, go to work, fulfill their responsibilities, stay busy from morning to night. On the surface, they look like people who are putting in the effort. But deep inside, there's a quiet, persistent feeling. I'm running, but I don't know where I'm going. And that is the real problem. When you don't choose a clear goal for yourself, life will quietly choose one for you. Life never leaves a vacuum. If you don't actively set a direction, your surroundings will fill that space. Your job will decide how your time is spent. Your circumstances will shape your choices. Friends, social media, trends, and other people's expectations will slowly write the script of your life. Not because they're malicious, but because you weren't clear enough to say no to paths that aren't yours. So you begin living on autopilot. Work when there's work, spend when there's money, scroll or entertain yourself when there's free time. Each decision makes sense in the moment, but together they don't add up to a direction. You're not failing, but you're not moving forward either. You're busy, but you're not building. You're in constant motion, yet somehow staying in the same place. The most dangerous thing isn't choosing the wrong goal, it's choosing nothing at all. Without a clear destination, it becomes easy to settle for convenient choices. You tell yourself, this is fine for now. You postpone taking your life seriously because there's no real pressure to go anywhere. And slowly you lose your sense of urgency, the one thing that actually drives real change. A goal isn't only something to achieve, it's a filter. It helps you decide what deserves your time and what needs to be declined. It gives you a reason to wake up earlier, stay patient longer, and remain disciplined even when no one is watching. When you have a goal, time no longer slips by unconsciously. Each day begins to carry weight. And only then do you realize a very clear truth. It was never a lack of ability. It was never a lack of opportunity. What you lacked all along was a direction clear enough that life could no longer choose for you. Many people delay setting goals not because they don't want to move forward, but because they're afraid of answering a question that feels too big. They believe a goal has to be grand, perfectly defined, and fully figured out from the start. They think that if they don't know exactly who they want to be in 10 or 20 years, then it's better to choose nothing at all. And that belief is precisely what keeps them stuck. The truth is, a goal doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to impress anyone. It doesn't have to be some distant, idealized version of yourself. A goal only needs to be clear enough to tell you what to do today and what to say no to. A good goal doesn't have to answer your entire life. It just needs to answer one very specific question: what is your next step? When a goal is vague, action becomes vague. You do everything a little. Learn a little, try a little, stay disciplined a little, but nothing goes deep enough to create real change. When a goal is clear, even if it's small, it creates pull. You start rearranging your time. You begin to feel uncomfortable wasting an evening. You start to understand that not every opportunity is worth taking, and not every pleasure should be prioritized. A clear goal gives you a new standard for making decisions. You stop seeing a day as just 24 hours passing by and start seeing it as a limited resource. You don't need to know exactly where you'll be in 10 years, but you do need to know how you want to be better in 1 year. What kind of person you want to become in 5. And if you don't have an answer, the default answer will always be the same. Life continues exactly as it is. The moment you define a goal that's clear enough, even if it's simply improving a skill, building a habit, or changing one part of who you are, you begin to behave differently. You stop living just to fill time and start using time to build something. And from that moment on, you no longer accept days that pass without meaning because you finally know where you're going. The comfort zone is a place where nothing really goes wrong. You do familiar work, see familiar people, live within a familiar rhythm. Everything feels controlled. You rarely fail. You're rarely rejected. You're rarely forced to face the feeling that you're not good enough. And because of that, the comfort zone doesn't hurt you. It doesn't break you. It simply makes you stop. The problem is, this stopping doesn't happen loudly. It happens quietly. Each day looks almost exactly like the one before. You're still okay. You're still functioning. Nothing dramatic happens. But deep inside, something slowly shrinks. The belief that you could become more than who you are right now. When you stop placing yourself in difficult situations, you also lose the chance to discover your real limits. The comfort zone doesn't kill you instantly. It kills you slowly by making mediocrity feel normal. It teaches you that as long as you don't fail, you're doing fine. It trains you to avoid challenges, avoid greater responsibility, avoid opportunities that involve risk. And every time you choose safety over growth, you reinforce the belief that you're not capable of something bigger. The most dangerous part isn't being in the comfort zone. It's justifying it. You call procrastination waiting for the right time. You call fear being cautious. You call the refusal to try being realistic. And little by little, you build an entire system of reasonable-sounding excuses so you never have to step outside. Meanwhile, life keeps moving forward, and the gap between who you are and who you could become grows wider every year. The comfort zone doesn't take your life. It takes your desire to live fully. It makes every day feel the same, and every year blur into the next. And one day, when you look back, the thing that hurts most won't be the times you failed, but the times you could have tried and didn't. There's a truth very few people want to face. People don't grow through thinking, they grow through experience. And experience only comes when you're willing to do difficult things, uncertain things, things that carry the risk of failure. Every time you step outside your comfort zone, even slightly, you place yourself into a new version of yourself, one where old limits no longer fit. At the beginning, difficulty always comes with awkwardness and fear. You don't speak smoothly yet. You don't perform well yet. You feel behind. But it's precisely in those moments that real capability starts to form. No one becomes confident before taking action. Confidence comes after you've acted, failed, adjusted, and stood back up one more time. Each time you choose to do something hard, you don't just gain a new skill, you change the way you see yourself. You begin to trust that you can handle pressure. You realize that discomfort doesn't destroy you. Instead, it expands your capacity to endure, adapt, and grow. The limits you once believed were impossible to cross turn out to be boundaries drawn by fear, not reality. The difference between those who move forward and those who stay stuck isn't talent, it's how often they're willing to do things they're not yet good at. People who grow understand that discomfort is part of the process. People who stay still wait for things to become easier, and they wait forever. Because difficulty doesn't disappear on its own, it turns into regret when you refuse to face it. Every time you choose the hard path over the easy one, you expand the boundaries of who you are. Not in a single day, and not in some dramatic moment, but through small, repeated steps. And over time, those steps carry you to places your old self never believed were possible. Most people's lives are shaped by a quiet internal conversation that plays out every single day. On one side is what you want. It speaks loudly, clearly, and demands immediate satisfaction. On the other side is what you need. It speaks more softly, more slowly, and is often ignored. The problem is what you want knows exactly how to make you feel good right now, while what you need silently determines where you'll end up in the future. What you want caters to short-term emotions. It wants a little more rest, a little more entertainment, one more day of delay. It isn't evil, but it only cares about how you feel in the moment. If you let want lead the way, life will feel relatively comfortable, but it will rarely move forward. You'll have plenty of easy moments, but very few real breakthroughs. What you need, on the other hand, rarely feels good right away. It asks you to study when you're already tired, to train when motivation is low, to stay patient when results haven't shown up yet. What you need doesn't promise instant pleasure, but it builds the foundation for a stronger, more stable life. Every time you choose need over want, you're investing in a future your current self can't enjoy immediately. The conflict between want and need happens every day, and your life is shaped by which side you consistently choose. If you always choose want, life may feel lighter, but you become increasingly dependent on your emotions. If you learn to prioritize need, you may feel more discomfort in the short term, but you create real distance between yourself and a life that never moves forward. Eventually, one truth becomes clear. Want gives you temporary comfort, but need gives you options. And real freedom isn't doing whatever you feel like doing. It's having the strength to do what's necessary, even when you don't feel like it. Many people are afraid of discipline because they see it as restriction, as losing freedom, living inside rigid rules. They believe freedom means acting on impulse, doing things when you feel like it, stopping when you don't. But if you look deeper, there's a clear paradox. People who live entirely by their emotions are often the least free. They're controlled by laziness, by fear, by short-term desires they don't even fully understand, let alone control. At its core, discipline isn't about forcing yourself to suffer. Discipline is a conscious choice, choosing what's hard but right over what's easy but empty. When you're disciplined, you no longer negotiate with yourself every day. You don't wait for motivation. You act because you've already decided who you are. And that consistency frees you from the chaos of shifting emotions. People without discipline believe they're free, but in reality, they're being pulled along by circumstances. They wake up late because they were tired the night before. They miss opportunities because they're not ready yet. They postpone their dreams because the mood isn't right. Their lives follow whatever happens to them, not what they deliberately choose. That isn't freedom, that's passivity. Discipline creates a completely different kind of space. When you control your habits, you control your time. When you control your time, you control the direction of your life. Discipline gives you long-term choice instead of short-term pleasure. It gives you calm in the face of difficulty because you know you're moving in the right direction. And eventually, you understand this clearly. Discipline doesn't take your freedom away. It gives you a deeper kind of freedom, the freedom not to be ruled by temporary emotions, not to be trapped by ease, and not to have your future stolen by choices you'll regret later. Many people say they don't have time, no time to learn more, to train, to pursue what they truly want. But when you look closely, the problem is rarely the amount of time, it's how that time is being used. Everyone gets the same 24 hours a day. The difference is whether those 24 hours are used consciously or quietly slip away on autopilot. Most time isn't stolen all at once. It's drained little by little. A few minutes scrolling as soon as you wake up, an evening lost in front of a screen without remembering what you even watched. Short breaks that stretch far beyond what they need to be. None of these moments are wrong on their own, but together they form a huge gap, the gap of things you could have done but didn't. When you lack awareness in how you use your time, you start living in reaction mode. You do what's easiest to access, not what matters most. You let emotions decide what comes next instead of letting goals lead the way. And when the day ends, you feel tired but not improved. That feeling repeats until you begin to believe you truly don't have time for anything else. The truth is, time doesn't disappear. It's simply spent on things that don't create long-term value. When you don't consciously choose how to use your time, you allow your environment to choose for you. And in a world designed to constantly steal your attention, awareness becomes a survival skill. The moment you start paying attention to each passing hour, you realize you were never as short on time as you thought. What you've been missing all along is the awareness to ask, is this time moving me forward, or is it just making today easier to get through? When you stop seeing time as something to kill just to get through the day, and start seeing it as a limited resource, the way you live begins to change. Every hour is no longer an empty space to be filled with entertainment or distraction, but a choice, and each of those choices, no matter how small, is contributing to the life you will eventually have to live. An hour used well does not need to be a perfect hour. It does not require inspiration, nor does it demand massive progress. Sometimes it is simply an hour spent reading a few pages, learning a new skill, training your body, or quietly working on a personal project no one sees yet. These hours don't create excitement right away, but they produce cumulative change, change you only notice after time has passed. On the other hand, every hour used unconsciously is also building a future where you depend more on circumstances, grow weaker in capability, and carry more regret for what you didn't do. Time does not take sides, it only amplifies repeated choices. Hours invested wisely compound. Hours wasted turn into a growing distance between you and a better version of yourself. Once you understand this, you stop searching for dramatic turning points. You no longer wait for a day when you feel motivated enough to change your entire life. You simply commit to using a few hours better each day. That consistency, not explosive bursts of motivation, is what creates real change. Life is not built through peak moments, but through small bricks placed correctly day after day. And every hour you use with intention today is quietly determining where you will stand a few years from now. Not all rest is the same. There is a kind of rest that helps you recover, and there is another kind that quietly pulls you away from the life you want to build. On the surface, they look almost identical. Both involve stopping, relaxing, doing nothing, but the motivation behind them is completely different, and that motivation determines whether you are recharging your energy or escaping responsibility. Rest for recovery comes from awareness. You know you have put in effort, spent energy, and need to pause so you can return stronger. This kind of rest has boundaries. It has a clear beginning and a clear end. When you come back, you feel more focused, more grounded, and free of guilt. Here, rest is part of a long-term strategy, not a form of giving up. In contrast, rest as escape usually begins with mental exhaustion rather than physical fatigue. You are not resting because you have done enough, but because you don't want to face what needs to be done. You extend the downtime, not to recover, but to delay. And the more you delay, the heavier it feels. What starts as comfort slowly turns into emptiness, then into self-blame, and eventually into a habit of avoidance. The biggest difference between these two kinds of rest comes down to a simple question. After you rest, do you move forward? If rest brings you back to the path you have chosen, it is recovery. If it pulls you farther from your goals, it is escape. And the danger is that this kind of escape does not create immediate consequences. It only causes you to lose direction, little by little. When you fail to distinguish between these two types of rest, it becomes easy to confuse self-care with abandoning your own future. And that is how comfort, something meant to be a necessary pause, quietly becomes the place where you stay for far too long. A person who truly takes control of their life is not someone who rejects pleasure, nor someone who lives in constant tension and rigid discipline. They still enjoy life, they still rest, they still allow themselves to relax. The difference is this: they do not let pleasure lead the way. They put pleasure in its proper place, as a reward, not as a lifestyle. When pleasure comes before responsibility, life can quietly slide downhill without making a sound. You begin to prioritize comfort over long-term value. You choose entertainment before completing what truly matters. And over time, you trade progress for ease. In contrast, when responsibility comes first, pleasure becomes more fulfilling. You enjoy it without guilt because you know you have done what needed to be done. People who are in control of their lives understand that pleasure should not be forbidden, but it also should not be unconditional. They do not ask, "Do I feel like it?" They ask, "Have I earned it?" That question is not meant to punish them, but to keep their life from drifting. It helps maintain balance between enjoyment and building, between the present and the future. When you place pleasure in the right position, inner conflict begins to fade. You no longer need entertainment to escape pressure because you understand what that pressure is serving. Comfort no longer weakens you. It restores you so you can continue moving forward. It does not pull you off the path you have chosen. It helps you go farther on that very path. And at this point, a clear shift occurs. You stop living to chase comfort and start living to build a life with substance. Pleasure is still there, but it no longer controls you. You decide when to enjoy, and more importantly, why you have earned that enjoyment. Many people live with a constant sense of being stuck, yet rarely ask themselves one honest question: who is actually responsible for this life? Instead, they reach for explanations that feel easier to accept. The circumstances aren't right yet. The starting point was too low. The family didn't have enough resources. Society is too competitive. The timing isn't right. Each of these reasons may contain some truth, but when repeated long enough, they stop being explanations and turn into excuses. All excuses share one thing in common. They make you feel lighter for a moment while keeping you exactly where you are. When you blame circumstances, you hand control of your life to things outside your reach. When you believe you can't move forward because of other people, society, or fate, you quietly accept that you have no power to change anything. That is a dangerous state because it trains you to do nothing. Excuses don't arrive loudly. They're subtle. They disguise themselves as logic, realism, even wisdom. Let's wait a little longer to be safe. Now isn't the right time. I'm not like those people. But the better you become at explaining, the better you become at delaying. And while you are justifying why you haven't started yet, time keeps moving forward without needing your permission. Here is the uncomfortable truth. No one lives your life for you, and no one takes responsibility for what you choose not to do. Circumstances may be difficult, but they do not decide whether you move forward. The only real decision is how long you are willing to remain where you are. Every time you choose an excuse over action, you reinforce a dangerous habit, the habit of believing you are powerless. And eventually, what hurts the most is not that life was hard, but the realization that many years have passed while you were still using the same old reasons to explain a position that never changed. The moment you stop looking for reasons and start taking responsibility, a deep shift happens inside you, not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because you reclaim the most important thing of all: control over yourself. Taking responsibility does not mean blaming yourself or denying how difficult things are. It simply means acknowledging one truth: no matter the circumstances, your response is still your choice. When you take responsibility, you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What am I going to do next?" That second question does not allow you to stay still. It forces action, even if the action is small, and it is action, not emotion, that pulls you out of powerlessness. Taking responsibility also means accepting the discomfort that comes with it. When you stop blaming, there is nowhere left to hide. You have to face your shortcomings, your poor choices, the opportunities you let pass. But it is in that confrontation that growth begins. You realize you cannot change the past, but you can absolutely decide how you will live from today onward. Real power is not about controlling other people or external conditions. It is the ability to lead yourself, even when no one is pushing you and no one is watching. When you take responsibility, you stop waiting for someone to save you. You become the person responsible for saving your own life. And from that moment on, you are no longer a victim of circumstances. You become a player in your own life, not always winning, but always able to move forward. There is a truth very few people want to accept. No real progress happens in a state of complete comfort. Every time you learn a new skill, build a new habit, or move to a higher level in life, you have to pass through a period of discomfort, uncertainty, incompetence, lack of immediate recognition, and it is precisely this feeling that many people turn back, not because they are incapable,
but because they cannot tolerate it. Human beings naturally avoid discomfort. We avoid tension, boredom, the feeling of falling behind, the feeling of not being good enough. Yet the paradox is that these feelings are exactly the signals of growth. When something feels hard, it does not mean you are on the wrong path. It means you are stepping beyond what is familiar. If everything feels easy, chances are you are only repeating what you already know.
All progress requires you to stay with discomfort a little longer than before, longer while focusing, longer while learning, longer while results have not yet appeared. The person who moves forward is not the one who never feels discomfort, but the one who does not walk away when it shows up. They understand that discomfort is not the enemy, it is the doorway. When you learn to stay with discomfort, you build a rare capacity, the ability to endure in order to grow. This capacity is not flashy, it does not earn applause, but it determines how far you can go. Those who cannot tolerate discomfort will always look for shortcuts. Those who can will take the long road, and that long road is the one that leads to real change. At some point, you realize that the discomfort you once feared is actually a sign that you are taking your life seriously. If you look back at the journey of anyone who has gone further than the average, one pattern becomes clear. They are not necessarily the smartest nor the luckiest, but they are the ones who can endure the longest. They can withstand pressure when results have not yet appeared. They can tolerate repetition when progress feels invisible. They can bear the loneliness that comes from choosing a path different from the crowd. And it is this capacity for endurance that ultimately determines how high their life can go. Many people begin with intense enthusiasm but stop very early, not because they lack ability, but because they cannot tolerate the middle phase, the stage with no rewards, no praise, no validation. This is when comfort becomes the greatest temptation. Quitting at this point brings immediate relief, but the cost is a life that never reaches its true potential. Endurance is not meaningless suffering. It is the ability to stay with the process long enough for results to emerge. It means continuing to do the right thing even when no one is applauding you. Those with high endurance understand that emotions come and go, but direction must remain steady. The height of your life is not measured by moments of intensity or dramatic breakthroughs, but by how long you are willing to maintain effort when things become boring and difficult. Anyone can try hard for a short period of time. Very few are willing to try long enough. And that is why, in the end, it is not the most talented who rise the highest, but those who refuse to quit when comfort is no longer an option. Many people believe that with enough determination and willpower, they can overcome any temptation. The reality, however, is far harsher. Environment almost always beats willpower. Not because you are weak, but because willpower is a limited resource. It gets depleted by time, pressure, and fatigue. Meanwhile, your environment works on you constantly, quietly, persistently, day after day. If you wake up each day in a space full of distractions, where everything is designed to pull your attention away from what truly matters, losing focus is not a personal failure. If you are surrounded by easy habits, low-standard relationships, and conversations that revolve around complaining and shallow entertainment, it becomes extremely difficult to live with discipline and long-term direction. You may push yourself for a while, but sooner or later you will be pulled back toward the average of that environment. Environment is not just physical space, it is also your information environment, your social environment, and your habit environment.
What you see every day, what you hear repeatedly, and the people you interact with most often are quietly programming how you think and act. No one needs to force you. Stay in it long enough and you will begin to resemble it. That is why relying solely on willpower to change your life is a fragile strategy. Those who understand this do not try to be stronger every day. They quietly redesign their environment so that doing the right thing becomes easier and doing the wrong thing becomes harder. This is not avoidance, it is wisdom. When you change your environment, you no longer have to fight yourself constantly. And at that point, progress stops being an exhausting battle of self-control and becomes the natural result of repeated choices made within the right environment. People rarely grow beyond what they consider normal, and that definition of normal is not shaped by books or goals written on paper, but by the people they spend time with every day. When you are in an environment where comfort is accepted, where procrastination, complaining, and merely getting through the day are the norm, your standards will gradually be pulled down no matter how ambitious you are. On the other hand, when you are around people with higher standards, a very different kind of pressure emerges. No one needs to lecture you or judge you. The way they work, manage their time, and speak about goals and responsibility is enough to make you reflect on yourself. You begin to feel embarrassed by your old excuses. You realize that many of the things you once believed were impossible were simply things you were not serious enough about. Being around people who operate at a higher level is not always comfortable. It makes you feel smaller, more aware of what you lack, more conscious of how far you still have to go. But that discomfort is precisely what fuels growth. It forces you to raise your standards if you do not want to fall behind. And it is standards, not motivation, that ultimately determine how you live each day. You do not need to be the best person in the room, but you do need to be in a room where effort is expected, discipline is normal, and self-improvement is not seen as excessive or strange. When the standards around you rise, your behavior will naturally adjust. In the end, you come to understand that choosing your environment and the people around you is not a social preference, it's one of the most strategic decisions of your life. Because you can't build an exceptional life in an environment that only tolerates mediocrity. We are living in an era where consumption has become effortless. With just a few taps, you can watch hours of content, hear endless advice, and absorb hundreds of ideas about how to live better, earn more, and become more disciplined. But there is a paradox that few people recognize. Excessive consumption, especially passive consumption, does not move you forward. Over time, it quietly paralyzes your ability to act. When you constantly watch, listen, and read without actually applying anything, your brain enters a dangerous state, the feeling of progress without real change. You feel like you know more, finally get it, or are motivated, and that creates a false sense of satisfaction. This satisfaction feels very similar to growth, but it requires no effort and no risk. That is why it becomes a form of pointless comfort.
Overconsumption also erodes your patience with the process. You become used to fast information, quick results, and ready-made answers. Then, when you return to real work, where progress is slow, repetitive, and offers no immediate feedback, you grow frustrated and quit. Not because the work is too hard, but because your nervous system has been conditioned to constant stimulation. The problem is not the content itself, but the ratio between consumption and action. When you consume 10 times more than you apply, you are training yourself to become a spectator of life rather than a participant. You become familiar with many paths, yet you never walk any of them long enough.
If you are not careful, one day you will realize that you have spent far too much time learning how to live and far too little time actually living. There is a clear line between someone who is moving forward and someone who is merely busy. The person who is moving forward creates something, even if it is small. The moment you create, one written page, an idea put into action, a habit maintained, a skill practiced daily, you step into a position of agency. You stop merely reacting to the world and begin to shape it. Creation, even at a small scale, forces you to face reality. The reality that you are not very good yet. The reality that your first output may be clumsy. The reality that some days no one will acknowledge your effort. But it is precisely this confrontation that leads to growth. No progress comes from waiting for perfection. Progress only begins when you are willing to start in an imperfect state. When you create, you are no longer swept along by an endless stream of information. You are forced to filter, to choose what is good enough to continue and what must be discarded. Your thinking becomes sharper and more grounded. You stop searching for motivation because the act of creating itself becomes the source of energy. The key is this: creation does not have to be grand. It only has to be consistent. One small step each day, but one that belongs to you. Over time, those small steps compound into competence, into identity, into a form of confidence that is fundamentally different from the fleeting excitement that consumption provides. Once you become accustomed to creating, you will notice a quiet but profound shift. You stop waiting for life to hand you opportunities. You begin to build your own path. And that is the foundation of a life that is not wasted on pointless comfort. There are days when you wake up full of energy, when everything feels within reach. And there are days when you feel tired, doubtful, and unwilling to begin anything at all. That is the nature of emotion. It changes daily, sometimes even hourly. If your life is guided by emotion, your direction will keep shifting as well, and the result is that you never travel far on any path. Mature people do not wait for the right emotion before they act. They operate by standards. Standards are fixed principles you choose to live by regardless of your mood. When your standards are clearly defined, you no longer have to negotiate with yourself every day. You stop asking, "Do I feel like doing this today?" and start asking, "Does this fall within the standards I've committed to?" And if the answer is yes, you act. Simple as that. Emotion seeks comfort. It wants rest, relief, and avoidance. Standards demand consistency. They are not cruel, but they are precise. They create a disciplined framework that prevents you from being dragged around by short-term fluctuations. That framework protects you from impulsive decisions you would later regret. When you live by standards rather than emotion, you may not always feel inspired, but you will feel grounded. You know where you are going and why you must keep moving. Over time, that stability produces results that temporary motivation never can. And eventually, you realize this: emotions may rise and fall, but your life is no longer pulled in every direction each time your mood changes. When you set a high standard for yourself, you do not just change how you think, you are forced to change how you behave. Standards do not live on paper. They show up in the smallest daily choices: what time you wake up, what you give your time to, what you say yes or no to when familiar temptations appear. And it is these choices, repeated quietly, that shape the person you become. High standards do not allow you to live on impulse. They require you to turn down certain short-term pleasures in order to protect long-term direction. That is uncomfortable at first because you no longer get to act purely on emotion, but that discomfort is the price of a life with a clear trajectory, rather than one that drifts with circumstances. When your standards are high, you stop tolerating half-hearted habits, broken promises to yourself, or days that pass without meaning. You begin to ask a sharper question: is this action worthy of the person I want to become? That question alone is powerful enough to pull you out of complacency, even when no one is watching. Over time, high standards stop feeling like a burden. They become instinct. You no longer have to force yourself to do the right thing, because doing the wrong thing starts to feel uncomfortable. At that point, discipline is no longer a struggle. It becomes self-respect. And this is the final shift. You stop living in pursuit of temporary comfort and start living in alignment with your own standards. Your life does not need to be loud or glamorous, but it carries weight. And most importantly, it is no longer wasted on pointless comfort. In the end, the real issue is not how many times you have fallen, but how many days you have allowed to pass in a state of comfortable stagnation without moving forward at all. Lives are rarely destroyed by one major wrong decision. More often, they are slowly eroded by thousands of small, safe, familiar choices that never require you to change. Pointless comfort is dangerous precisely because it doesn't hurt right away. It lulls you to sleep with thoughts like, "It's fine, I'll do it tomorrow," or "There's no rush." But when you finally wake up, what you have lost is not a single opportunity, but an entire chapter of your life. Your ambition has dulled, your will has worn thin, and the most unsettling part is that you begin to feel at home in a lower version of yourself.
The message of this podcast is not about living in hardship, constant pressure, or self-punishment. It is about living with awareness, knowing what you are choosing, what you are trading away, and where you are headed. Comfort only has real value when it comes after effort. Rest only has meaning when you know you have earned it. If there is one thing worth carrying with you after listening to this, it is this: no one is coming to rescue you from an easy, complacent life. Only you can be alert enough to pull yourself out of it. And the moment you raise your standards, take responsibility, and act despite discomfort, you step out of the crowd that merely gets through the day. That is also the spirit behind Think and Speak English. It is not just about learning a language to communicate, but about using language as a tool to upgrade your thinking, expand your perspective, and build a deeper version of yourself day by day. Upgrade your mind, improve your English, because when your thinking changes, the way you live, the way you learn, and the way you move through life changes with it. If this podcast made you slow down long enough to reflect or clear-minded enough to take one small action today, then it has done its job. And if you want to continue that journey, we will meet again in the next episodes.